You are not defeated when you lose. You are defeated when you quit. Paulo Coelho. Most of us spend a lot of time trying to become less stressed. We look for better systems, better routines, or we try setting stronger boundaries. We think that maybe if we organize enough and optimize enough, eventually life will settle down. And for a little while, sometimes it does. But then something changes. The demands at work increase. Our families need more from us. Plans change. Or the unexpected problems show up. Then suddenly, the thing we optimized for wasn't peace. Rather, it was a sense of control. And control usually works right up until life decides it doesn't. So the reality is, it's more likely we're solving for the wrong thing. Because stress itself isn't always the problem. Think about that for a second. If you've ever trained for, prepared for, or built something, you already know this. The goal was never to remove your effort. The goal was to become someone who could carry more of it. Yet somewhere along the way, many of us have started believing the opposite. Now, if something feels heavy or that we're being weighed down, something must be wrong. But more realistically, that's the furthest from the truth. Maybe it's not about how do you make life easier. Maybe it's how do you increase what you can carry without breaking yourself. Because there's a difference between overload and challenge. There's a difference between exhaustion and growth. And resilience isn't built by protecting ourselves from struggle. It's built by taking on manageable amounts of it over and over until things that used to feel impossible start feeling normal. Not because the demands change, because you did. It's interesting how we've rebranded standard everyday discomfort as if it's almost an emergency. We've built this culture around wellness and self-care, but somewhere along the line, the message got twisted. Now, the moment we feel this slight discomfort of a heavy workload or the friction of a tough conversation, we immediately pull back. We label normal life tension as toxic, or we claim it's harming our peace. And we use that explanation as an excuse to step away from the responsibility of addressing it. But if we're being completely objective, are we actually burning out, or are we just out of practice? When you look at it closely, a lot of what we call overwhelm isn't a crisis at all. It's just the natural resistance that comes with living and growing. It's what happens when you push against your current boundaries. But because we've developed this deep addiction to comfort, we mistake that necessary friction as a sign that something is broken. We've conditioned ourselves to believe that a good life is frictionless. So when the expectations rise or the stakes get higher, our first instinct isn't to step our game up. It's often to find a way out. We tell ourselves we're protecting our mental health. But underneath that safe word, we're often just protecting our right to stay exactly as we are. We use these modern wellness phrases to justify a retreat from basic accountability. So it feels justified in the moment because everyone around us is doing much of the same thing. But when you constantly treat that normal pressure of progress as a threat, you aren't actually strengthening yourself. You're just training yourself to run away from anything that requires effort. And that sets a dangerous foundation for what comes next. Because when you choose to retreat from that pressure, there's a hidden cost you have to pay. It's what we'll call the fragility penalty. And it's a consequence that most of us never see coming. As human beings, we're adaptive by nature. But if you constantly protect yourself from friction, your baseline threshold doesn't stay the same. It shrinks your capacity naturally, regresses to match the lesser level of demand you're placing on it. Imagine what happens if you spend time engineering a perfectly frictionless existence. You manage your schedule, if you're able to, down to zero stress, and you isolate yourself from anything unpredictable. On paper, you can think you've won, but in reality, you've just lowered your tolerance. But then the most insignificant bump in the road can start triggering the same level of panic that a major life crisis used to. It's a false sense of a lack of problems in the way that we live today. We think we're creating safety, but we're actually creating vulnerability. By eliminating all of the heavy lifting, we can become so emotionally brittle that the slightest hiccup can knock us off balance. You can't actually insulate your way to a successful life because the world doesn't care about your boundaries. It keeps moving, and it keeps throwing unexpected challenges your way. If your strategy is always to do less so you can feel better, you're trapped on a descending escalator. You have to keep cutting away more and more of your responsibilities just to survive, until eventually your world becomes incredibly small. Then it changes to you aren't avoiding stress anymore. You're just living in fear of it. So this is where we need to completely change our relationship with that internal tension. When you feel that anxiety in your gut or that weight on your shoulders, your brain wants to signal a full-scale retreat. It tells you that the stress is a stop sign, a warning that you've reached your limit and need to back off. But that friction isn't a directive to quit. It's just data. It's a neutral piece of feedback telling you exactly where your current baseline ends and where your growth potential begins. If you can learn to detach emotionally from that feeling, everything changes. Instead of viewing pressure as an emotional attack, you start seeing it the same way an athlete views the weight on a barbell. It's just resistance. It's proof that you've pushed past your comfort zone and are finally demanding more from yourself. But when you reframe it as feedback, you stop wasting energy complaining about how hard it is, and you start focusing on how to adjust your approach to handle the load. It's like an early warning system for your capabilities. The friction is simply letting you know that the system is under load and is ready to be conditioned. If you run away from it, you miss the opportunity to expand. But if you stand your ground and lean into it, you signal to yourself that you're capable of holding up under pressure. However, when you start treating stress as information rather than a threat, you stop being a victim of your circumstances. You realize that the problem isn't the external environment. It's your internal capacity to process what's happening around you. And once you accept that, you realize just how ineffective an alternate strategy really is. You have to understand that an easier load to carry is a trap. It's a seductive illusion because when you're feeling overwhelmed, reducing your responsibilities offers immediate psychological relief. If you step back from the responsibility that you likely chose to do, cancel the commitments, or lower your standards, the pressure drops instantly. Your nervous system calms down. And for a brief moment, you feel like you've made the smart choice that's also the healthiest for you. But that relief is a lie. It's temporary, and it comes with compound interest that you have to pay later. When you artificially lighten your load instead of building the capacity to carry it, you don't actually solve your problem. You just delay the consequences. The long-term emotional reality of a lesser life isn't peace. It's a lingering toxic sense of inadequacy and vulnerability. Deep down, you know what you're capable of achieving. But when you constantly negotiate your standards down to match your lowest level of conditioning, you create an internal disconnect. You start looking at your life and realizing you can't handle what you should be able to handle. That creates a subtle, persistent self-doubt that eats away at your own confidence, far worse than a heavy schedule or demands ever could. The illusion convinces you that you're practicing self-care, but you're actually practicing self-sabotage. You become a spectator in your own life, constantly ducking and weaving to avoid any project, role, or relationship that might test your boundaries. The load gets lighter, but you get emotionally smaller. And eventually you have to face the harsh reality of what that trade-off actually cost your identity. And ultimately, it comes down to a choice between two distinct types of discomfort. You can choose the psychological pain of regret and stagnation, or you can choose the inspirational pain of discipline and capacity building. And in case you're wondering, there's no third option where you get to avoid pain altogether. The psychological pain is what happens when you protect your comfort and have to live with the internal knowledge that you blinked when things got heavy. It's a dull, exhausting ache that erodes your self-respect over time. The inspirational pain, though, is completely different. It's sharp, it's immediate, and you find it right at the edge of your current limitations. It's the voluntary friction of holding yourself to a higher standard when it would be easier to coast. When you choose to lean into that good pain, it doesn't break you. It refines you. It forces your system to adapt, to grow, and to build the structural capacity required to handle a bigger, more meaningful life. There's an incredible sense of unshakable self-respect that comes from knowing you can carry a heavy load without buckling. It's a confidence that can't be bought, and it can't be faked through modern stress management hacks. You only get it by standing in the storm, feeling that weight, and refusing to negotiate your standards away. Stop treating discomfort as a sign of failure and start treating it as the price for excellence. That will cause your entire perspective to shift. You'll stop looking for exits and start looking for leverage. You'll realize the goal is never to find an easier path, but to become someone who can walk the hardest ones without turning back. At some point, we have to stop looking outward and start looking inward. It's so easy to point at the demands of our careers, the pace of the world, or the sheer volume of our daily responsibilities, and blame them for how we feel. We could spend a lifetime wishing the world would slow down or that the expectations would magically get easier. But the world doesn't bend to accommodate your current comfort levels. It just keeps demanding execution. So the next time you find yourself staring at a demanding day or a week that's coming ahead of you, when you're feeling that familiar urge to scale back, pause and look at what's really happening. Notice where your mind naturally goes. Are you looking for a way to lighten the load, or are you looking for a way to step up and tackle what's right in front of you? The standards we hold ourselves to aren't defined by how we perform when everything's smooth sailing. They're defined by what we do when the pressure mounts and the margins get razor thin. You don't need a life with fewer challenges. You just need to become the kind of person who isn't broken by them. The weight isn't going to change. The only real thing to ask yourself is, how much longer you're going to wait to build the capacity to carry it? As always, thanks for spending a few minutes with me. Until next time, stay sharp, stay grounded, and keep showing up.